This is The Guardian.
Reged Ahmad here on Gadigal land with the full story.
After speaking with my colleagues overnight, I've made the difficult decision to step aside as leader of the Victorian State Parliamentary Labor Party and as Premier of Victoria.
Victorian Premier Jacinta Allan is gone, pushed out as her party seeks to change its fortunes ahead of November's election. Taking her place as the new Premier is her former deputy, Ben Carroll, who just weeks ago promised Allan he would not turn on her.
This election, only Labor can stop the risk of a Liberal One Nation government. But it is clear that on key issues that matter to Victorians, our government does need to go in a new direction. As Premier, I will deliver that new direction.
Labor hopes a change of leader will help rebrand it in the wake of allegations of infrastructure project corruption and dismal polling. But with just 4 months to go and an ascendant One Nation, is it enough? Today, Victorian State correspondent Benita Kolovos on the ousting of Jacinta Allan. It's Tuesday, the 28th of July. Hi, Benita. It's good to talk to you today. A really big news day.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been covering Victorian state politics for some time now. How extraordinary is this moment?
I feel like this is one of the biggest days of state politics I've covered. I was obviously there throughout the COVID pandemic, the Daniel Andrews press conferences, when he resigned, when Jacinta Allan became leader. But the pace and the drama around this leadership spill was nothing like any I've seen before.
And having a premier step down 4 months before an election, how unheard of is that?
Yeah, look, we have seen in Queensland, Anastasia Palaszczuk and Stephen Miles. I think that was a little bit earlier in the campaign. We see it sometimes on the opposition side. We saw it in South Australia recently, but not in the government, not in a long-standing government as well, and not after Daniel Andrews resigned and brought in a new leader. And that was all about a reset. And now we're having another reset again 4 months out from an election.
We'll get into how the day unfolded and what it means, but Jacinta Allan stood down this morning. Her speech made it clear this was personal for her because she's been in politics for a very long time, I believe, since the age of about 25.
She was the youngest ever female MP sworn into Victorian Parliament. And she has been, one of the hardest workers within the Labor government, pretty quickly rose through the ministry and into senior positions. But I think she said that sometimes doing the right thing and sticking it out when it gets tough, they're on opposite ends. And she made the call instead of fighting this. And if she had fought a leadership spill, it would have been a really messy 6-week-long protracted affair that was just going to cost too much time and too much instability for the party. And she's a team player.
So she stood down ahead of a caucus meeting that was due to vote on her leadership. Her belief was she clearly didn't have the support. The meeting then turned to who would be the next leader, and that descended into a bit of chaos.
Yeah, so when she announced she wasn't going to be running, we all expected it would be a pretty quick exercise. They'd go in, they'd come out with a new premier and a new deputy. That isn't what happened. They ended up being in that room for 2 hours. What we saw was the Attorney General, Sonia Kilkenny. She decided she was going to put her hand up for the leadership as well. And that was quite remarkable. She was a supporter of Jacinta Allan. And if she had gone ahead with that, it would have been a 6-week process that the Premier had just said she was seeking to avoid. So we could literally hear, we were standing outside of the caucus room and we could hear shouting in there. The Premier Jacinta Allan, she was chairing that meeting. She was telling people to sit down, to wait their turn. Quite extraordinary. even from outside with everything that's going on, to hear how heated it was in that room. It got really to a point where the deputy leader was appointed, Gabrielle Williams, and then there was talk about making her an interim leader while we waited for that process to begin, the contest between Sonia Kilkenny and Ben Carroll. But in the last 15 minutes of that meeting, Sonia Kilkenny, she withdrew her bid for the leadership and Ben Carroll was elected unopposed.
Well, look, Ben Carroll, he's been sworn in. You have a new Victorian Premier. But what a lot of people are talking about is the fact that just really a few weeks ago, he looked Jacinta Allan in the eyes and told her he wouldn't challenge her.
It was one of the most awkward press conferences I've seen. And yeah, he literally said, I will look you in the eyes and tell you I'm not running. He also conjured up his daughter and said he wanted his daughter to see a female premier elected in their own right, because that hasn't happened in Victoria yet. He was asked about that pretty heavily on that today at his first press conference, and he said circumstances had changed. And look, you have to give him credit. Over the last 6 weeks, we've had almost daily stories alleging corruption in the big build. These are the government infrastructure projects where construction unions have allegedly run amok. And in light of that, and in light of MPs going out over the winter break and speaking to their constituents, they felt that there was a need for a royal commission into those allegations. And the Victorian Premier Jacinta Allan, up until yesterday in Cabinet, was refusing to do that.
Is that what this is all about?
Absolutely. And I think it's really telling that in his first act as Premier, he came out today and announced a royal commission into the construction sector. And I do note he's actually broadened it out quite a bit from what the opposition are proposing. We haven't got a terms of reference yet, but he says this will be looking at top-tier construction companies, the unions, subcontracting arrangements, the entire sector, and any sort of corruption that's unfolding in that space. So I think it's pretty telling that that was his first announcement. This is something Jacinta Allan refused to do. And even when MPs were walking into Parliament this morning, they were saying they were voting in that leadership spill on the issue of integrity.
We also can't not talk about the threat of one nation here. How much has that driven Labor to maybe make a move they wouldn't have made otherwise?
I think a lot of Labor MPs are very nervous about their seats, particularly those in the outer suburbs. There was some polling that came out again over this winter break in this 6-week period where circumstances changed that showed, there could be a wipeout for Labor if they continue on their path. And there's no denying that Jacinta Allan is polling really poorly. Her favourability figures, I think they're lower than Scott Morrison's before 22, Peter Dutton before the last election. She's even lower than how Australians viewed Donald Trump. So I think there was a consensus that there was no way they could win the election with her in that role. So maybe trying a different course, a new leader, someone that isn't tied to Daniel Andrews. Ben Carroll isn't from the same faction. Jacinta Allan and Daniel Andrews worked their way up together and he kind of appointed her as his successor. Maybe a clean break will do them some good.
Wow, you've really put those polling numbers into perspective there. He said, Ben Carroll, when he gave a press conference after he was installed as the new Premier, he said, I'm not Daniel Andrews and I'm not Jacinta Allan. So if Labor, as you say, is trying to have this fresh start, he's not completely a fresh start, though. He's been there all along, hasn't he? Isn't he going to struggle?
That's a really good question. You could say he hasn't been there as long as Jacinta Allan or Daniel Andrews. He is from a completely different faction to them. They're from the socialist left. He is from the right of the party. So there are some key differences there. If you think back to 2023, when Jacinta Allan was elected the Premier, Ben Carroll got into a bit of a tiff with Daniel Andrews in that meeting. He was one of the only people that stood up to him then. So I do think that he is different. I do wonder whether that's just to us political watchers and whether that'll translate to the Victorian people.
Do you think the voters will go 3 premiers now in one term for Labor and it just will eat away at their support even more?
I think so. And I think there's also an element too that there's a bit of an it's time factor there. Labor have never won a 4th term in Victoria before. They're seeking something that is pretty extraordinary. If they win this election, think it's going to be 16 years in government. That's a, entire generation, right? So I do wonder, even with a new leader, is that going to be enough to kind of counter that? Maybe it's time to give someone else a go.
I mean, you've really led me to the ultimate question everybody's asking here. If this is all about rescuing Labor's chances in November, how far do you think this might go? Could it just be not losing as many seats? Is a one nation or some sort of Liberal win just inevitable here?
The one thing that makes me think this might not just be, a saving the furniture type leadership change is the big buffer that Labor currently has. Ben Carroll likes to say, I'm not Daniel Andrews, but we should note that Daniel Andrews, every election he went to 3, he picked up more seats for the party. So currently they have 11 extra seats than is needed to have a government. I think the Liberals need 16 seats to form government in their own right, take away the one nation question. That works out to like an 8 or 9% swing away from Labor, and that's pretty extraordinary. So I think we could potentially see a minority Labor government here.
Even after everything?
Yeah, I think that's the question, right? I think that buffer is the thing that is kind of saving them at the moment.
We'll be right back. Benita, before we let you go, we just have to talk a little bit more about One Nation and the rise in the polls, which is Labor's sort of got its eye on that. It is pretty extraordinary how well they're doing, given they have no Victorian leader.
No leader, no candidates, no state-specific policies. Ben Carroll today was saying that is their biggest threat, and the scariest part is you can't really articulate what it is at this point. Obviously, the polls have started to dip a little bit or plateau for One Nation, and maybe more pressure will come as they do start to roll these things out. But it is quite extraordinary. And like I said, the Liberals need 16 seats to form government. And not only are they fighting Labor, but they're also fighting another threat on the right as well.
Benita, let's just end finally on Jacinta Allan and her legacy. She had a message to women in politics at the end. She said, I'm only the second woman premier. How much of her demise is about Labor finding it difficult to support women in politics? Can we say there's any element of that?
It's really hard to kind of quantify, right? And I look at her favourability figures and do wonder, is gender a factor in why they're so low? People can't articulate why they don't like her. Is it the fact that she is a strong woman in politics? I take that and then I put that to one side. When you're reading about these allegations around the big build and her insistence on not pursuing a royal commission, not giving the anti-corruption watchdog the powers they need right now. She was Transport Infrastructure Minister at the time that these allegations were all coming out. I feel like that's more of the issue here. And then, we put that to one side as well and look at all the achievements that she has made as the second female leader in Victoria. In the scheme of things, they're quite little. They don't cost a lot of money, but they make such a massive difference, particularly to women's lives. Jacinta Allan told me back in 2022 that she's lived with endometriosis. She spoke so publicly about things like heavy periods, which no female leader has ever really done before. There was 15 women's health clinics. The pill is now available over the counter at pharmacies. The green whistle for IUD procedures. Really, in the scheme of government, small but massive changes. And she's done a lot in the housing space as well, effectively rezoning so many parts of our city to get more housing for young people.
So there is a legacy there.
I think there is. I think it's mixed. And I think with time, I guess we'll get more of a picture of it.
Benita, the page of history has turned in Victoria. Such a busy day for you, but we really appreciate you taking time out to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was Victorian State Correspondent Benita Kolovos. This episode was produced by Karishma Luthria and Taylor Strano. Sound design and mixing by Lou Hill and Daniel Simo. And the executive producer of Full Story is Hannah Parks. Don't forget to subscribe or follow Full Story wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Reged Ahmad. See you soon.